Hi, and welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Today's episode features Fritz Baier. He joins us with experience around the world and various atmospheres, official and non-official, of travel and leisure through trials and tribulations of 6 years. He's compiled his book to near completion, and it's in the publishing stages now, being edited as we speak. I look forward to reading his book, and I hope that everyone enjoys the show we have today, as I feel like we had a really good discussion together, and the connection around nature was really relevant here, and that was something I enjoyed about the show. I know you will too. So open up and sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of the World Networking Podcast. Hi, and welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Fritz, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. I just I was waiting for my part.
You were expecting me to screw your name up again. I
saw you stop. Let you hesitate there a little bit. It is Baier. Good job. I'm a 64-year-old guy. I live here in Hawaii. Retired military officer, and have written a book about my adoption search and discovery and reunion with my birth families. But as we've chatted before, Cameron, I'm a military brat, so I was raised in this whole environment, military environment as a kid, and I moved around all over the place, and then subsequently joined the military myself, obviously, and then found myself here after a long 20 years of military service in Hawaii, and it's my home. Ironically, my wife and I are moving to Germany in a couple of weeks, just for a couple of years, so that'll be fun.
Wow, yeah, that's a great switch.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Yeah, it is. We just had the opportunity, because we still work for, the Department of Defense and everything as retired military, as civilians. We can travel with them, travel really essentially like we were in the military. So we get orders and then we move. And we're going to Stuttgart, Germany, and my son will come here and keep our house and hopefully keep the cats alive and not kill my plants and things like that. So anyway, so that's sort of what's immediately in the immediate future here for us. But anyway.
I've got a real quick interjection on that.
Sure.
Is gardening kind of one of the things you like to do in your pastime in Hawaii?
Oh yeah. Hawaii, you can plant a broomstick and it'll grow. So, it's not hard, right? But I do have a green thumb, and I'm pretty good at it. And so where we live, not on the beach, so we're kind of up in the mountains a little bit, and so at about 800 feet, which for Hawaii, is, for the rest of the continental United States, of course, it's like, yeah, I live at 5,000 feet or whatever, in Denver or somewhere like that. But here, that's somewhat up the hill, so to speak, and so we get good rain and we get a lot of sunshine, and I can plant stuff and it just goes crazy. I grow peppers and citrus and all kinds of stuff, and I don't really have a big garden, so it's kicking butt.
Well, no, that's exciting. I just I had to ask. We have quite a few plant lovers that follow the show, and that's always interesting topic, agriculture these days.
Sure. Yeah, I could. I won't, but I could talk about plants. I like them. My wife has the cats, so and they treat me with disdain, to be honest with you. So plants don't argue back, and if you take care of them, they're good to you.
Absolutely. No, There's a lot of things to be thankful for with plants.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually just had some jerky. I still have pepper in my tooth. It's 30 minutes later, still burning. Yeah. It's amazing, these structures of organic matter that just produce various things that we couldn't dream of making without nature's help.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things. I've got everything to all the herbs and stuff like that, because I like to cook too. So it's like I got all the herbs that I need, and I don't have to go to the store to get lemon juice or any of that kind of thing. And I got a fig tree and a bunch of other stuff that's good. So like I said, I like to bake and I like to cook. So I typically step out, go down around the corner, snip off what I need, come back up and do my thing. So it works out.
Hey, that's awesome. At least it's interactive, right? And
yeah, definitely.
Work that you can love.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very fulfilling. Anyway, we'll leave it at that, I guess.
No. It's just really something that I know we can get deeper into. So I'm trying not to dwell too long, because like you mentioned, gardening's a thick plot.
Yeah. That was a clever pun. You did well. It's a thick plot.
Hey, thank you. Well, are there any other fun facts you have to share about yourself, Fritz?
I make a really good tiramisu. I've lived kind of many places across the country, and in Italy for a couple of years. That's where I learned how to make tiramisu. And I guess I've climbed Mount Fuji twice. You know me from my our little backpacking encounter kind of thing. But I guess those are fun facts. I've got. I think they're fun, but
yeah. In fact, actually, if you want to go ahead and elaborate on that for our viewers, how did we meet?
Yeah, well, to not make it an incredibly long story, but as a kid, I loved to backpack, and I was with scouts, and like a lot of us were, and our scout troop was pretty bad at like actually doing merit badges, but we were pretty good at camping and backpacking and stuff. So as a kid, I did that, and then you grow up and you get busy and you have kids and you have a life, and you're suddenly 40 or 50 years old, and I tell people it wasn't a crisis, it was just a revelation, But at some point I was like, hey, what is it I really like to do? And one of those things was backpacking, and so I went out and said, I'm gonna start backpacking again. And so, I went out and bought all this gear and everything. And of course it was all the wrong stuff, and it was super heavy. It was just terrible. But here in Hawaii, and then I went over to a neighbor island. I went over to Maui, and I hiked across Haleakala, and it was phenomenal and gorgeous and everything. And of course I had a blister about that big around on the bottom of my foot when I was done, but I learned some stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to do was hike the Pacific Crest Trail. So starting at Mexican border, outside of San Diego a ways, and then, walk my way to Canada. But I work, so it was kind of, you can't do it all at once like a lot of the thru hikers do. But I am a multi-year thru hiker, so I'm a myth. I've coined that for myself. So anyway, I was hiking along. I got myself to Quincy. I got done, and I was fishing for a ride back to Reno, and our mutual friend Matt kind of set me up with you to give me a ride, and we had an awesome hour and a half, 2-hour ride down to Reno. We talked about all kinds of stuff. You were moving, and we shared a good time, and I really sincerely appreciated that. That was nice, and we stayed kind of loose touch since.
Yeah, I've had kind of a wild ride since then, and it's been a journey getting back in touch with certain people, and you were one of those that never really left my frame of mind. I always was like, I need to text him. I need to follow up, and I kept remembering about your book. Yeah, that was the one thing, and we'll get into that down this show, but I sincerely appreciated that conversation we had on that drive, and Matthew is a wonderful host for a lot of people. He whenever he connects me with people, I don't really hesitate. I really appreciate his word and contributions to the community, and I really think it's wonderful to support people like that, especially when they need support, because those people need support.
Yeah, he's super good at it, and you were you were heaven sent in a way, so it worked out for me.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And I always appreciate all the trail angels and help. I don't like asking for it, but there's times when you don't have any other recourse. You got to do it. And so speaking with him and then him linking up us, here we are today because of that. So it's about connections.
Absolutely. And there's a good aspect of that point to bring up about trailing and venturing off on your own, especially. I believe you were a solo hiker for that trip, and it is vastly important that you have a sense of community aspect when you're planning things like that. Without planning your trips into small local communities and getting supply runs, that stuff becomes near impossible. You could say that you'll be macho or whatnot. Some people are like, I'll go out and figure out the bushcraft. But with that much traffic in certain seasons, and there's so many factors a lot of people don't consider when they go into those environments. And that's something I definitely implore anyone who's looking to be outdoorsy from personal experience. Definitely know the land and the time of year you're going.
Yeah. It's important. You can kind of wing it, but that's not real safe. And
not by yourself.
No, not by yourself. The PCT is generally very safe. And if you pick, to your point, if you're picking the right season and you've done some planning ahead of time, you can go and do it yourself. It's quite easy, but you still need some. Somebody's going to have to help you, right? Whether it's the bus to get you there or it's, a friend dropping you off or what have you. So, nobody is really utterly, what I guess I want to say is everybody is supported in some way or another when they're doing the PCT or doing some outdoor kinds of backpacking adventures or what have you. It's just a reality. But in this case, we were lucky and, we met, and that's the cool part.
Absolutely. No, I'm very thankful. And again, I'm glad that your journey was safe during that trip. That's always a blessing.
Yeah,
but,
it was good.
It helps to have a few other hikes under your belt before you hike the PCT. So
it does. It did. I learned some things, along the way. So by the time I started on the PCT, I wasn't carrying an 80-liter pack that I thought I needed, and a full range of season of clothes, etc. So in the cast iron skillet. I'm kidding. I didn't carry that, but but I knew somebody who did. But anyway, So it was crazy, but. So that was I think it was kind of a fetish. I don't know. He didn't have his cast iron pan.
The things we do for fried bacon.
yeah, and that's kind of that's kind of what he was getting after. But anyway, so the PCT's been great, and that led like I said, and led us to connect up.
Well, I have a question on that since we're on this topic too. Sure. Do you have a favorite trail head that you enjoyed the most, that really stuck out to you, and why is that reason?
Like a trailhead or trail proper, I guess.
You like a system of trails or a single trail, just something, an area that really stuck out.
Well, for the PCT, I think the area around Yosemite is pretty amazing. If you're on the John Muir Trail part of the PCT, so the JMT is, basically runs from Lake Tahoe and down to, Yosemite, or actually down to the down to Mount Whitney, basically. So there's a 200 something odd section of the PCT that is also the JMT. That is gorgeous country, number one. It's just, your high Sierra. It's pristine. It's really gorgeous. So for the PCT, I'd say that section of the trail is phenomenal. My favorite trailhead, I guess I would say, is probably the trailhead that took me up Mount Fuji, and that I went up what was called the Gotemba Trail. So it's kind of on the backside of Mount Fuji, and all the tourists sort of go up the front side and a much shorter and steeper trails. I chose the longer one and the one that was less traveled. Is that metaphorical? I don't know, but I did it, and it was beautiful, and it was quiet. For me, Mount Fuji was kind of a necessary thing for me to fulfill kind of a dream I had, or kind of a promise I made myself from childhood, when I learned that my dad had climbed Mount Fuji when he was a young man in the Marines in Japan. And I, before I even knew what Mount Fuji was, I was like, I'm going to do that because my dad did that. And so I fulfilled that sort of promise to myself to do that. And, about 10 years back now, but and then subsequently took my daughter on it. But the trailhead there was just really nice. Like I said, it's quiet, and it was a place for kind of some spiritual contemplation kind of thing.
With that elevation difference, you have a lot of different factors too on how you feel, and
oh sure,
a lot of that training I know for high altitude hikes is a lot of breath techniques. And
I think for me, I live at sea level essentially. I usually try and get to the trail a day or two, to the trailhead or to the trailhead area a day or two in advance. I would say, the only place that I really, sort of worried about, like say high altitude sickness or something like that, was probably during that High Sierra section, the John Muir section of the PCT. Fuji is about 10,000 feet, and if you don't spend an inordinate amount of time at high elevation, you generally reduce your risk for that kind of that high altitude sickness. And you can take some pills too that'll kind of help out, but they're prescription. But I really haven't had, I guess the bottom line is I really haven't had much issue with it. It's more difficult, of course. You got to breathe harder, and I'm not a young guy, so I go a little slower, but maybe sometimes a lot slower. But I think it's manageable. As long as it's like not 13,000 feet, which is difficult for anybody.
Yeah, that's nothing to laugh at. I mean, the high Sierras that I'm used to in Plumas County, I mean, some of the areas I would go to that are considered high points at 9,000 feet.
Yep.
So that's a whole nother mountain on top.
yeah, it is. It is pretty wacky sometimes.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, the town I grew up in is 3,500 elevation. And
right.
To think about that, like, if you were right next to the sea, maybe it wouldn't seem like such a drastic change, but at the same time, it would also seem like a huge change because you have even more drop retrospectively to everything. And It's just very interesting, like people's perceptions on what they can handle and how the human body reacts and adapts to those scenarios. Like a lot of people don't properly prepare.
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do even for high elevation is just, or for, hiking, is just be fit. And so I walk a lot here and, or run. And, I just finished a marathon. The Honolulu Marathon was like 10 days ago. I'm taking time off, but,
wow.
Just staying fit and just, getting out there and doing it. And, I think that part, kind of carries you over the elevation features and, the elevation aspect, meaning, maybe, proportionally a little less oxygen in the atmosphere at that elevation, but you can get by. Like I said, if you're fit, you're good to go for the most part.
Yeah. I remember running up and down mountains at certain points where, I'm hauling rocks and all sorts of weird things and building fire pits or whatnot. And, you definitely, the more you get out there and do it, the better you feel through that summer season or whatnot. And then it comes right back around the spring, and you're like, oh, I'm groggy.
Yeah, this is hard. Yeah.
I know it's not as relatable over in Hawaii with the snow and such, but
well, surprisingly, we actually get snow here on top of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa on the Big Island. So there are people who make it a point of surfing on the same day, surfing and skiing. It's tough to do, and you got to be here at the exact right time, but you can actually do it. And so
crazy.
Yeah. Hawaii's weird. We have almost every climatic zone, that's scientifically identified climatic zone. So we have everything from desert to tropical rainforest and savanna, and you name it. There's parts of this place that look like West Texas, and other parts that look like Vietnam. I mean, just real jungle and lots of rain.
Crazy.
So, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I had the chance to go to Hawaii back in 7th grade, and that was the only time I've been.
Oh, good.
I enjoyed that trip a lot. I think
cool.
It was a culture shock for sure, though. Just because I was in the Christian school, I didn't really know that people actively worshipped in Hawaii still. Certain Polynesian gods and deities and I mean that with all respect, but I just am not as familiar and I came in and we didn't know what we were doing, and we threw an altar gift on accident, and that was one thing I still wish to this day they would have just taught us that about the culture we were going into. Because that is, now that I'm older and mature, I can mature to those facts. I can understand and the importance of understanding the people you're going to visit. And yes, I know it's the United States, but they have all right Polynesian cultures to have respect.
Yeah, dude, you're exactly spot on. In fact, the state and a number of different, civic organizations have taken a lot of steps to help educate people. Yeah, we're in the United States. Copy, but this place is the most, probably at least in my mind, the most exotic place you can live and still be in the United States. Yes. And for that, the culture is huge here. Respect to that culture is huge. And so they've started, like on the different airlines, and when you come in through the airport and at the hotels, kind of briefing people, kind of just telling them, hey, come here, have a great time, hit Waikiki, you can hit Dukes, have a Mai Tai, do all of that. But when you're out and about, or when you're going to some of these other things, some of our parks or historic sites and stuff, be respectful and, respect the land. And, I was born here. And so for me, the word we use for the land is aina. So for me, the aina is really important. It gives life. And so, respecting people and respecting the land is critical. And, so we ask people to visit responsibly and respectfully, and things will go well. And if you don't, then, maybe it won't go so well. So, and
that's not a Hawaii thing. That's travel.
Yeah, it's kind of an everything thing.
I've seen, I think it was this last year or maybe the year before, where there was a tourist in Central America going on top of the pyramids, and they're coming down, they're upset. People are upset at them. Just totally disconnected from the culture they're immersing themselves in. Why bring yourself to that environment if you're not going to educate yourself?
Yeah, it's like carving your name on the Colosseum. I mean, what are you doing?
Yes. Yeah.
So we have that sort of thing here. I mean, it's just a bit, and when you do, when you come to Hawaii and you're chill about it, and you try and understand where the culture is and where the native Hawaiians in particular are coming from, you'll be fine. It's great. And you're gonna live it up and have a great time.
Yeah, I have a friend out there. Shout out TX if you're around. I know that he's been doing a lot of electrical work out there, and I'm sure they're busy on the main island now. With a bunch of
there's always something going on, but there's a lot of work probably. I'm supposing as we kind of look at reconstruction of Lahaina over on Maui that there'll be a lot of work going on for the trades, for the people in the trades.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, it's something I just haven't heard as much information as I would like to on
Sure.
the subject. But there's a lot of stuff still up in the air with that. So,
Yeah.
but that's neither here nor there. I'm not a real estate major, but from outside perspective, looking into the Hawaii situation, it's very tragic, and it's good to see that there's at least people that respect what's going on in that situation.
Yeah.
Moving forward, though, what tends to be your favorite type of work? Like, do you like busy work? Are you more of a, like trial by fire?
I guess for me, I like being mentally engaged, right? So, and I like work to have meaning. And sometimes that's hard. In my line of work, I'm kind of a bureaucrat, so I move a lot of papers around. And sometimes that's not. I mean, it's not always, but sometimes it's hard to find fulfillment in that. So for me, and I'm not a saint, but what I'm saying is I do like helping people, and so when I have the opportunity to do that in my profession, that's one thing. It's great. And then other than that, I like working with my hands. I told you I like cooking and baking and things like that, because I can see the start to finish and kind of an end product. So yeah, that's it kind of, I guess, in a nutshell.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I think that it's one thing that a lot of people don't discuss enough is how different mediums of learning affect you.
Yeah. Well, I think for work, I think people can find fulfillment in kind of in anything. Well, first they have to be interested in it, and they want to do it, right? I've met lots of people in my lifetime, and there's guys that are intellectual, total eggheads, and they're professors and this, that, and the other, and they find fulfillment in what they do, because they're imparting knowledge, or they're sharing that, or they're mentoring or coaching people. And then you have people in the trades that are doing something substantial, and they come and help you fix a problem, and that's fulfilling too. So I mean, I think the worst thing is to work in something that you just don't like, and you're doing it just for the money. And that's, people do that as well, but I can't imagine any level of fulfillment in that. So again, for me, it's kind of like, well, doing paperwork at work is fine, but helping folks is great, but sometimes coming home and making a cake is pretty awesome. So,
yeah,
because you can just see it, like I said, you can kind of see it start to finish. You go, yeah, I can accomplish something. That's really good.
No, absolutely. The process is part of the journey.
Yeah. Exactly.
And obviously, like, I have a lot to learn. You've got a few years on me, but I still try to listen and really learn from mentors, especially.
Yeah, that's good. I think we can. I think at any age, you can learn something. My, little segue. My birth mother, we'll probably get to it, but who I looked for and found. When I met her, I was in my 40s, and she was, in her 60s, and even when she was in her, late 80s, she always called me a kid. So my point is, you can always learn something, and you should be always in a state of learning, and it doesn't matter how old you are. So. I love to learn something, every day. It's like, oh, I learned something. That's great. So put that in your kit bag. Yeah.
No, it gives you engagement, a purpose to life. I really do think it's important, especially with an age where depression rules a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, true that. Yeah, that's tough.
No, it's something I struggle to help people with all the time. I wish it wasn't the case. I wish everyone was mentally well, of course, but even with myself, I struggle with it. All it takes is a month, a week of being out of work, or family member has something unfortunate come up, and it's easy
to get off your game. It is easy to get off your game. Yeah, life is sometimes challenging, and I surely recognize that. I think we all kind of go through some of that stuff, at different points in life, and I'm with you. I certainly have, as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a common discussion for sure with different cultures all over the world. I mean, every society has their ups and downs, truly. But moving forward here, let's see. Has being an author helped you open your perspective more to the pros and cons of your past careers? Or is it something that you feel your pros and cons based on your experiences helped to define how you perceived your past?
Writing is important for me. I'm good at it when it comes. I mean, in terms of, I'm not crowing. I'm just simply saying I can put a sentence together, and I'm pretty good at it. My original approach to in life, I guess, to writing was, as I was growing up and going to school, it was, English was, an easy class, and, I could write the essays and do all that. And I mean, it wasn't hard. And professionally, when I was in the military and now as a DoD civilian, writing is essential. I it is a critical part of communicating, and I'm good. I can put a good memo together. I can put a good briefing together. I can, make things clear and explainable, which is really the point of it. The funny thing is, though, is that my experience with writing, and in particular writing this book, was really, kind of, I never knew why I had this penchant for writing and for telling a story until I found my, birth mother, and I found my birth families, and I realized, it was a kind of it's a genetic thing. There's a thread there that they were good at. I mean, I like writing poetry. My birth mother wrote poetry. My great grandfather wrote poetry. So I could see where, I was somewhat predisposed to do it in the first place. So to kind of get to your question, how is it reflected on the pros and cons of my other careers, and how has it really helped? I would say, just in a nutshell, I mean, in an official environment, when I'm putting something together and writing, I'm like I said, I can do that pretty well. Making things clear and explainable to senior leaders is really an important skill, and so I've kind of mastered that. I've translated that skill and that ability to kind of say something clear and coherent to others in this book that I was, sort of compelled to write, by my circumstances. And so I think I was able to be kind of clear and tell a good story in the book. So they've complemented each other, I guess, is really where I'm kind of trying to wind up. They've helped, and I can't imagine any kind of profession or skill or job where you don't have to do some kind of written communication. You either have to read it or you have to write it, and so it's integral to who we are, as people and society, and our way of life, etc. I mean, and I know that sounds a little overblown, but clear writing is really good, and if if you read something that's poorly put together, it's confusing, and you lose track of what the person's trying to tell you, and it's aggravating. So I've tried to avoid all that.
No, it really makes a big difference. I try to tell people this all the time, and it's something I struggle with. That's also why I try to reiterate is practice makes perfect. The more we send out there, we're perceiving it ourselves, but it's a constant struggle. I think this is you could say it's maturity, but a lot of it is across generations too, where it's always a struggle because you're trying to understand the other generations around you.
Yeah. And I think as a skill, it's just like you said, I think to your point, it's something you got to kind of constantly do, kind of be practicing. For me, I've spent probably 6 years behind this computer, working for the last 6 years on telling that story. But I've gotten better at it, and I know I could tell the difference between when I started and when I finished, and refining a style and everything else. So it all folds back together, I think, both on the personal and professional side, and just kind of complementary. It helps all along the way.
Oh, and I'm honestly excited to talk to you more along the book details down the show's path. I really think the viewers will get a kick out of hearing your story too, more in depth.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Let's go ahead and see. Did you ever struggle with anything in school? And while you were going through your schooling, did you find anything relevant that might be able to help any struggling students out there?
Well, I think, I've alluded to it, and I think, we've talked, as a military brat, I went to a lot of different schools, I went to like 13 schools for 12 different grades. And for military brats, or for kids whose parents are, let's say in international business and they move around or whatever, but they sometimes call third country kids. In my case, our label is military brats, which is a term of endearment. But, when you're moving around a lot, first of all, the school subjects that, you get taught are the same everywhere you go, right? So it's English, it's math, it's science, it's this, it's that. So that, the curricula kind of doesn't really change a whole lot. I struggle with math. I think, I don't know why, just conceptually, just looking at numbers makes me crazy. I can't even do Sudoku, and my wife keeps telling me, no, it's just a puzzle. I'm like, nah, I don't want to do it because it's got those symbols on it and I don't like them. So I don't want to touch it. So the point, or your question, I mean, I did struggle with math, but I think in the larger context of at least my life, and for others who move a lot, sort of the biggest problem is really, or the biggest challenge, I should say, is actually social relationships, right? When you move around and fitting back in. And for military brats, you wind up having to be incredibly adaptable. You are driven to adaptation, to the point that, like if you live in the South, you start mimicking the accents because you want to fit in. And you're looking for other people who are like you that move around a lot so that you can, kind of have your own tribe, your own band, you can socialize. So for me, that was, part of the inherent struggle of being a military brat and moving around all the time, was being able to find and fit in really quickly. I mean, within a matter of days, because otherwise then you were just, and people are people. There's a herd, instinct out there. And when you're odd and different, you kind of excluded a lot of times. And, I mean, this was the 60s and the 70s. I'm not saying it's appreciably better now, but at least back then, if you didn't fit in soon, then you were kind of left on the outside, and that was a lot of no fun. So being able to, enter the classroom, look around, kind of see who was like you. And I don't mean physiologically or, whatever. I mean, you could kind of tell who, or you got a sense of who might the military brats be, who'd moved around a lot, where they'd been, and then kind of make those connections. And so for me, that was really the big challenge of school, of the first 12 grades anyway. And if I had something to offer, I'd say, being flexible and being adaptable in a situation where you have no choice is kind of an imperative. So you have to be good at it. And being a false extrovert, which a lot of military brats are, is kind of one of the things that an attribute they pick up. So a lot of, people are normally introverts or extroverts or somewhere in the middle. But boy, when you're, a military brat and you're moving around and you jump into a new school, you're just an expert. You have to be until you get settled. So I don't know if that, kind of gets after.
That's perfect. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap that point up. From what it sounds like too, it really was a struggle in that situation and with people in similar situations for relatability.
Yeah, it's tough because I mean, on top of just so, we just talked about like getting in, right? But then you get out because, your parents are moving. And it's like for me, and many military brats and other kids who move around a lot, getting out is another thing too, because I mean, a lot of times you don't stay very long. So you might be there for a year. And I mean, I look at people who've grown up all their lives in the same town with kind of like with envy, in some ways, because now I had a great life, but I mean, I look at them with envy because it's like, man, there's so much continuity and everybody knows everybody. Now I know in a small town that there's a downside to that too, but as a military brat, as a kid who's really transient all the time, when you're leaving, it's really traumatic. I mean, because that one, you got to start over, so you got to do this whole thing all over again. It's going to be a different dynamic, and it's traumatic. It's and a lot of us experience what is called disenfranchised grief. So you're sitting here grieving over something that you don't know how to express. That's what disenfranchised grief is. It's like there's no socially acceptable output for your grief. And I remember my mom asking me, why are you crying? We're leaving, who cares, kind of thing. And I'm like, man, I'm leaving my life behind. I'm like in 5th grade, and and it's so you make these bonds as kids, and they're strong until they're broken, and they're broken because circumstances beyond your control break them. And so that's hard. And so, like I said, if there was something I could say to, help somebody, I'd say, well, do your homework in some ways, know what you're getting into, know what you're getting your kids into, I mean, I had kids and then I sort of did the same thing. I mean, I joined the military and moved around, but what I tried to do, and maybe not with the greatest success, but I tried to do was as much as I could manage my career so the kids could finish like high school in one spot, or we could stay for an extended period, so it wasn't as traumatic as I experienced anyway. So my kids will tell me whether I did good at that or not.
Well, on the internet, I don't know if your kids were going through school well. The internet was kind of becoming established, but it definitely changed the dynamic from what you were used to.
Oh yeah.
My dad is a very similar age to you, and I've talked to him about this stuff, and one thing he likes about the Philippines right now is there's a lot of neighborhood dynamics that are in play, and that's something that I definitely see why you would draw values from your childhood in a situation like that, where, and again, it's similar in your situation, but just kind of the opposite end of like, you saw this, you witnessed this, but you were just on the other end of it. And that again is it's a different perspective than a lot of people are used to hearing. And I'm glad that you shared it. It sounds like a very tough situation. I as an empath, I would have a hard time. My grandma actually did the same thing. She, I think, went 9 different towns or something before she was old enough, but they had a family of 6. So she was the oldest sibling, had to take care of the kids. Very, very hard, and she came from the generation from the 40s. And I think she was doing that, in 40s, 50s.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not, what I'm not saying though is that it's an unhappy childhood. I'm not saying that, because I would also say, brats, military brats and others like that get opportunities that like other people don't get. And I say that, contrasting military brats with like home, people who stay in their hometown. I mean, you do get exposed to different cultures. You do get exposed to different ways of life and how things are in other places. And I think that broadens your horizons. I think that makes you a more adaptable and flexible person. And, I'm not well, I guess I'm more accepting when I travel, internationally. I'm like, okay, this is how they do it. And it's not my way necessarily, but it's their way. And so, you just go along. the other thing I'd add is just that, particularly with military brats is, you make your happiness where you find it, right? And so I didn't have an unhappy childhood. It was just bumpy and disconnected, and then that part was difficult. But the day to day, running around outside, playing with your friends, and riding your bikes all over the place, and having a good time, and all that, that's all the same. And so my childhood was happy. It wasn't doom and gloom, and it wasn't dark. It was just interrupted all the time, and that is a factor. I mean, it's just a reality, right? And you kind of have to accommodate that somewhere along the way in life. And I have, in part, by writing about it.
Well, no, and surely that's something that, again, a lot of people, I think, would view negatively at first because they're not used to it. But once it's because a lot of people disassociate with the military too, and different aspects of like that living difference. And those are people that ultimately they need to sleep, and they have lives too. So there's a healthy balance, I think, to the culture exposure and having your own time to define your path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Sure.
I think that's very, very great. And honestly, before we get into your book, I wanted to touch back on one thing.
Sure.
Are there any preferences you have when it comes to finding your creative spirit? Like, do you enjoy being indoors more, outdoors more when you're creating, or is it under pressure where you feel like your creative spirit comes out the most? Sure.
I mean, I think I kind of tend to expansive answers, and I try and reel myself in. I think for me personally, the outdoors is a source of inspiration, I suppose. Backpacking and being out in the wilderness inspires you to think. At least for me, inspires me to think poetically, right? As you're walking along, you're looking at the extent of the sky and the horizon, and or if you're in the trees or in the forest, whatever. I don't listen to music when I'm doing that, so I'm kind of engaged with where I'm at in the environment that I'm at. A lot of hikers actually do listen to music, and that's cool. I don't have any issues with that. But the outdoors is probably for me, inspiring from a creative perspective, but also inspiring from a spiritual perspective, right? So I don't clobber people over the head with my spirituality. I just say, hey, look at those trees. They're amazing. I mean, they're pumping 40, 50, hundreds of gallons of water out of the ground up to the top of their leaves every day, just to let chlorophyll and sunlight interact and make energy and make them grow. And that's mind blowing, right? I mean, it's just like, wow, why is it doing that? I mean, and so I get sort of some spiritual fulfillment and inspiration by being outdoors. But in terms of writing, I would say that's an indoor activity, obviously. And I take some of what I've gotten out of the outdoors and bring it indoors. But as I'm writing, I actually do listen to music. And my wife was always kind of going, well, how can you possibly do that? And I go, I don't know. But it relaxes my mind. And then, I'm just kind of going along and feeling what I feel and kind of putting it on paper. I'm not the guy who looks for, and some artists do, and I appreciate that. I'm looking for an altered mental state, you know what I mean? So, some of the greatest works ever have been, created by people who were, high or something, and that's cool. But that's, it's generally not me. Maybe a glass of wine, but beyond that, kind of, or no.
I totally understand. I mean, as a songwriter, poetry enthusiast myself, I definitely see the advantage of getting in kind of a something that is scientific backing to a front to a degree, flow state. Where you're getting in that zone, and if you're able to drown out, the way I view it is you're drowning out the world from your task.
Right.
And it's connecting on your own, like you said, it's similar, like a spiritual journey.
Yeah, I think it's about, kind of tapping other parts of your brain, and particularly for the arts, right? Doing that and finding that creative corner in your brain that you don't go to very often because you're washing the dishes most of the day, or you're mowing the lawn, or you're going to work and you're doing your own thing, and it's maybe not especially creative. And so for those who arts aren't their job, for those of us who just kind of are maybe dabbling in it, or aren't full timers, finding the flow state, I think is what you called it, is part of that. And for me, in here in front of a computer and writing my story is really listening to 60s and 70s R&B, or and old pop music, or even something more modern. So that's how I kind of get in my groove, and then it's just off to the races, and I'm inside that part of my brain that's unlocking all these stories and sort of helping me put them on paper.
No, it's very powerful stuff. When you are able to engage in a balanced way, it's rewarding.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. You're spot on. Yeah.
With the active life of the outdoors coming up, people are looking to be out and about more. Sasquatch Farms CBD brings organically grown products in the Sierra Nevadas, from the soil to the people. Farmer John has worked on green projects on the farm since 2013. He looks forward to providing you with the highest quality soaps, salves, CBD tinctures, pre-rolls, along with some other fresh products. It takes a community in farming to survive, so any efforts made to support our farmers in the world helps to support our society as a whole. So remember, if you can't catch him out on the farmers market, catch him online at SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. That's SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. Thank you. Now back to the show.
That's a perfect segue into the story behind your book.
Right.
And I wanted to see if you would get into kind of the general core elements of what your story is about. I know we've gotten into the early details about, being relative to family and a very personal journey. But I just wanted to see if you would be willing to debrief us on some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's a good word. That's a good word.
Not intentional, just
no. It sounds like work.
I know.
That's awesome, though. That was really good. It makes me laugh. We've kind of, you and I have talked a little bit about it before, but I mean, and we've sort of danced around it here. But for me, I was born here in Hawaii, and I was adopted at a pretty young age. I mean, it was like 18 months. My folks were in the Marine Corps. And my birth mother, was married, but in the process of divorcing her husband, who was, kind of a philanderer and kind of, not a good person necessarily. So anyway, she was doing that. She got pregnant by another married man, and that stuff happens, and it's just the way it is. Anyway, bottom line is, so I was given up for adoption, and I lived my life as a military brat, and traveled with my family, and I had 3 siblings. I still have two living, and we were all adopted. So I have another sister who was born here in Hawaii. I have another sister who was born in Vietnam, and my brother was born in North Carolina, and he's since passed. But we were all adopted, and we were in this fabricated family made out of compassion and love, people who wanted to have children and couldn't, so they adopted us. And so we lived that life, and that's fine, and it was great. And that's who I am. And Fritz Baier is a derivative of my parents and their family histories. But growing up, and particularly as a teenager, I got to the point where I was like, I don't really understand, and I couldn't articulate very well. I do now, but I couldn't articulate it well. But what I really was struggling with was understanding why I am who I am. Because in an adopted family with 4 siblings and 2 parents, nobody is genetically connected to anybody else. And we all have different preferences and traits and so on. And so you sit there and you see that every day, and you're like, well, why do I like to write or paint or do this or that? And my mother's an accountant, and I hate numbers and all that kind of stuff. And so I was not tormented, but plagued by this question of trying to understand why I am who I am. And I couldn't answer it because I didn't have a way to answer it. And so I was fortunate in that at some point in 1993, Hawaii changed its adoption laws and allowed adoptees to get their birth records. Now, I got to say for a second, I was in a closed adoption. So this is where all the records are sealed and nobody gets to know anything. And it's just buried in some vault somewhere. And, and you can't really access it. And most states still have lots of restrictions on that stuff.
Now, sorry to interrupt here, but as someone who's unfamiliar with the adoption process and details, stuff like that, is that a common thing that it gets vaulted off?
Well, it was, it was in the early to middle to maybe to the late part of the 1900s. I know that sounds like, wow, that's a century ago, but I mean, it's not really. It was just, a couple of years ago. More commonly these days are what they call open adoptions, where the information is shared. Birth mothers know where their child goes. It's not always the case, but it's more common. And so the birth parent or the adoptive parents have some history of the child, genetic, maybe not all the identifying data, but when I was adopted, it was sealed up and it was never going to come out of that vault unless some legal change was made. And in this case, in Hawaii, they did do that. And I would have never had an opportunity to know. Now I will do a semicolon here a little bit and say, however, today with the advent of, all the DNA services and stuff like that, I think today, if I was starting again, from scratch, and I said, I don't know why I am who I am, and I was looking for a way to find out, companies like Ancestry or 23andMe or some of these others would be a way to do that. And I've helped people find their connections by using Ancestry and other things. So people have kind of called me up and said, hey, can you help me find such and such? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let me see what you can do. So that does give you like a huge springboard into figuring things out. You're still faced with the dilemma of connecting and finding people and connecting to people. And that is that's really the focus of the book is really, the search that I went through, it took 23 years, really kind of tie it all together, and the challenges that you face, even as adoptee, with a genetic inheritance that's common to somebody else that you've just discovered, and kind of fit back together, either in some kind of relationship that isn't really well defined. So whether it's, are you really going to be part of the family? Are you going to be a friend? Or, all those kinds of questions are just up in the air, and there's no relationship script for that. So you don't know what to do. When I first met my birth mother, I found her in 1999 and called her up and made these connections, and it was the most fulfilling moment of my life. But as we moved forward in the relationship, it's like, I don't know what to call her. Do I call her Beverly because that's her name, or does she want to be called Mom because that's what she feels like she should be called because she wants her baby back, because there's these deep traumas that she experienced of giving up a child, etc. So all that is sort of uncharted territory, and so what I kind of tell the story of, at least in a good part of the book is how that played out, and how it for me resulted in, fulfillment, right, and kind of a psychological and personal and spiritual connection with these families that I was genetically related to and became part of by virtue of this search and discovery and reunion process, right? So that's the core of it, if you want. That's kind of the thrust of it. The details, of course, are kind of spelled out, and I kind of tend to drift off into them, but it was it was a good journey. It's a great journey, and it's not over. I also took the opportunity while I was doing that discovery process to research into the histories of these families. So my adopted families, I have my Baier side, obviously, and my mother's maiden name was Boughton. So I looked into, where did these people come from, and what were their family stories? How did they get to America, right? And for my biological side, Cochrane, which is Scott Irish, and my Figueira, my Portuguese side, same thing. Where did they come from, and how did they get to America? And so there's a second volume to the book. The first volume is kind of, here's how I found all these people and what it means, and the issues that we were talking about earlier, kinship and identity, and how that changes when you connect with your birth families and stuff. But the second volume is really about the history of these families and some of the crazy things they did getting to America or being in America. I've got a counterfeiter in the background, and I've got my great uncles was a bigamist, and that's why the Cochrane family moved to Oregon, and so there's all these backstories that are pretty amazing, and so the second volume is kind of full of that stuff. But
how neat! No, yeah. That's great. In the past, we had a discussion about the toughest element for you being the editing process, the revisions.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about why that was so tough?
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, I can tell you something about it. I felt like, so I finished manuscript in February of 23, and I thought that was huge. I walked upstairs and I told my wife, I was like, look, I've been working on this for 6 years. It's done. And I started crying. I was like, just tears were leaking out. I was like, it's just like this massive accomplishment. And I thought, well, okay, cool. Now just go get it published. But I wanted to make sure I did a good job, so I hired an editor, and she did a phenomenal job of helping me organize the story, and no matter what if you're a good writer or not, it doesn't matter. You're not gonna see things, so you typo stuff, and or you make you leave a word out, or you make an awkward construction of some kind or whatever, and so a lot of help putting that back together, and that took the better part of a year, because I could read it, I could have somebody else read it, I could have a third person read it, and we'd always find somewhere along the way a little something that was just kind of out of whack, and I'd have to go fix it. The other thing was I wrote this thing in Word, which is a standard application for just doing text documents is fine, but when you're making a book, you have to format it, and Word is not good for formatting. So I had to learn how to format, and I had to then choose the cover art and devise the cover art, and so you're moving from this artistic kind of thing, and this gush of emotion and expression that comes out on a piece of paper, and then you're just transitioning to like sort of the business end of it, where you're like, well, I got to package this thing, and I got to get it ready for other people to digest, and they're only going to digest it in this way when it looks like this, or it sounds like that, or it has these attributes to it. So that was really a lot of work and a lot of learning, so I was like I said, I was done with it in February, and I'm on the cusp of publishing, about a month from now, and it's like, wow, that was a lot of work, and I did not expect that. I was naive, to be really honest. It was like, I'll write it, and it's going to be great, and then that's it. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's this other stuff. And so writing
can really bite you in the butt.
It's well, I said writing was the easy part. I think writing was the easy part. It's just packaging it up is a lot to do, and I'm corresponding even as not literally as we speak, but this morning even on some, I want to make sure I'm not copyright infringing. So you have to go and check to see if you can borrow some words from somebody, or you can quote this poem, or you can do this or the other. And so a lot of it is this sort of administrative stuff of stitching it all together. But if I was recommending to somebody, I'd say, I guess I would kind of say, do your artistic thing and get it on paper first. That's the hugest step, to be honest with you. And because so many people have stories inside them, and we don't really have an oral tradition in our culture, and podcast ironically is kind of the development of that, but we don't have a strong oral tradition in our culture. And so I felt like I needed to capture all these oral histories and tell a story, even though it's written on a piece of paper, an oral story on paper, that I could give to my kids and my family, and for others who, were adoptees or were brats and had similar experiences, and they could, it would resonate with them. So, get the story down first, then, get help, because there's lots of help, to put it all together and package it up. That's my 2 cents, I guess, if I was going to throw something out.
Great information. For writers out there. I genuinely think any information for the struggling writer is good information, because they know they're not alone. It's a scary feeling, especially when you're trying to actually accomplish something from what you're writing.
Yeah, and there is lots of help out there. I mean, you can just Google the crap out of stuff, and there'll be somebody who's had that experience, or has been down that road before, or can give you pointers and stuff. So I've leveraged a lot of that in the last 6-8 months trying to get it together.
Yeah, it's a wonderful tool for community. Again, like community-centric tools are powerful, because again, it's communication. It's networking at the core. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but it matters how you do it, right? Form is everything. Yeah,
I'm with you.
I think this is a perfect bridge into our next question here.
Sure.
For you, do the details of your book matter more than your ease of read for a viewer, or did you find that it was more about the healthy balance, less about sacrificing what you're trying to identify with your words, and more about just being comfortable with what you're writing?
Yeah. For me, there's a fair amount of detail, in the book. But I think, at the end of the day, you have to speak with your own voice, right? So, it is me in that book telling a story, and I tell it the way I talk. I tell it the way I feel, and I, whatever emotions I felt as I was writing it or experiencing it, is there. So there's probably, my editor, told me I wrote too much, and I understand that. That's why there's a second volume. But and that was with well-intentioned, so she wasn't being critical. She was just saying it's a lot. So there's plenty of detail, but I felt like the detail was relevant to a larger understanding of the issues that are in the book, which is, how do you reconnect, and how does your identity change when you do reconnect, or does it change, and what are the notions of kinship that are out there, and how do you how are you experiencing them now that this other situation has manifested itself? So here you are in a new family, and how is that kinship? How are those kinship relationships formed and strengthened? All that, and so that's kind of the focus of the book. But I told that story in with my voice that I have, and so I do worry, like, well, I hope I didn't bore anybody, but but knowing something about my parents, or knowing something about my biological mother and what she went through, and relating that through her letters and the interviews I did with her before she passed, and getting that out as a story was really important. So I didn't sacrifice too many details, and I wrote it in my own voice, and I think it reads pretty good. Some beta readers have said it's a good story, so I trust them. That it is, and that it'll resonate with other people.
Now, quick question: beta readers, is that just a test?
It's like a test reader. Yeah, you. I mean, you can hire people, but I mean, you can, there's a balance. I mean, you can find a friend. Now, friends don't want to hurt your feelings a lot of times, so they'll say, yeah, well, this was awesome. It was super great. I loved it. Pulitzer Prize, whatever, I got friends and relatives who were a little distant, and they read it, and the editor read it, and so these were people who were disconnected to some degree from the emotions in the story, and then they commented and said, okay, yeah, this was good, or you're slowing down here, or maybe this stuff needs to go in a second volume, companion book or something. I mean, recounting somebody's history of where they were in the Civil War and what they did is admittedly not necessarily germane to the main story of like me finding my adopted or my biological families, right? So, but it's fascinating, and so that was the backstory stuff, those kinds of things. Homesteading in Montana. Go ahead.
It makes for a really good read.
Yeah, I tried to hit the balance there. So so the first volume is really about a search and discovery and reunion with families by an adoptee. That's what it's really about. And then like I said, the second part is all the wacky stuff my families did, just being families and being human. I mean, you name it, everything under the sun. There's no new sins under the sun, and believe me, my family was as entirely human as everybody else. It's pretty amazing.
I get that. I don't even know my full lineage, but I do know that I have a member who was in Alcatraz.
Yeah, wow.
Which is definitely it's one of the shocking ones that shocked me. But it explained a lot at the same time, because my family's crazy.
I had the same exact experience. My grandpa, I'm named after my grandfather, Fritz, and he was kind of a roughhouser when he was growing up. He was born in early 1900, so like 1904 or so, something like that, and played football and was a sharp guy. Got his degree from Gonzaga. I'm in my office. His degree is above me. It's like this big. It's got a big gold seal on it. It's amazing. It's all written in Latin. I mean, he was a smart dude. Became a school teacher, and at some point, he was elected to be the county treasurer of Shoshone County in Idaho, and for some reason decided to take money that wasn't his, and wound up in Idaho State Penitentiary in Boise. I didn't know any of this growing up, and I didn't know any of this before I started this book. But coming along, I'm doing some research, and all of a sudden, here's this thing that says, "Hey, here's a mugshot of this guy," and I'm like, "That's my grandfather." I was like, "What the heck is going on?" So that led to an excursion into a whole nother thread of the story. Like, how did that happen? And the ironic thing is, or the interesting thing is, so he was. He took money. I actually think he was a Robin Hood, and I think he distributed it because he pled guilty. He didn't ask for any extra time. They sentenced him immediately, and off he went to jail. And the next day or so, there was a public opinion piece in the local paper that said he ought to be exonerated and pardoned. And so I don't know the rest of that story, but I get the sense that he was trying to do something good, because this was during the Depression, right? So there was a lot of people that were out of money, out of food, out of everything. And I suspect, I can't prove it, but I suspect that he was stealing money from the county. But was redistributing it and was giving it to people who didn't have any, and all of his friends from that period of time were diehard friends. I mean, they stayed friends for a lifetime, despite what, the stigma of going to prison. So, weird little things as the rocks you turn over and you're going along and you're doing your family history, and all of a sudden you find this thing and you're like, wow, that's interesting. That's bizarre. I didn't know about that. So, I found out my grandfather was a convict by seeing his mugshots on.
Yeah, that is pretty wild, man. I know about some things in my family like similar where there's scuttles and
sure.
I think, I don't know if it was because my grandpa, I think he did go to jail, but I don't know if I'd have to go to the county to see. Probably.
Yeah, it depends on where, and but a lot of those records are available, so you can you just have to know where to look, really, and that's kind of the key to a lot of this. But I will say though, my grandpa Fritz was awesome. He was a great grandpa. Even he taught me how to fish, and left a huge impression on me, and I loved him dearly. Of course, as a kid, I didn't know any of this other stuff, but it didn't matter, and it still doesn't matter. He was a good man. He was a good guy.
Yeah, and no, same case with my grandpa. I mean, he made mistakes
exactly
in that time. There was a lot of anger in the family, and it's just it was a different time for the family unit to exist.
Yeah.
A lot of that, I think, just sprawls back to the communication was different.
Yeah. Well, I think when we were talking earlier, it's all about, the realization that we're all human and we all make mistakes. And that's the theme of the book too, is this, there are new sins under the sun. Everybody's done, somebody didn't create something new, something bad to do. I mean, it's existed since we've been, walking upright. So, so infidelity or
just murder,
robbery, or whatever. I mean, whatever, bigamy. I mean, there's all kinds of. I have a counterfeiter, like I said, in the background, and he's, stealing essentially. Also went to prison, but all that stuff. It's just who we are. I mean, we're humans, and we try and do our best. I think that's the standard. Yeah.
It's when I'm talking to people about history, especially U.S. history, I tell them, we have to remember that this was a mass invasion. To a degree, it was a mass invasion. Our country is kind of founded on that, where it's not that we have to feel bad for that necessarily actively. I feel like it's just the situation we have to understand and identify now and work on solutions towards compromising and making it effectively equal. If we're people that say we're about equality, let's act on that.
Yeah.
And if that's not what we want as a people, if we've defined our country as something different, it's time to redefine our definitions. I mean, update.
Sure.
I don't think there's a problem with updating governments. Historically, that's all a country being overthrown is kind of an update to that government. In a degree, it's societies change. You can't expect a country to stay the same through these changes.
Yeah, I think it's how you change is what's really important, and it's not change isn't bad. I mean, our country's evolved considerably since it was founded. I mean, we all know that. We get taught that in history class. Some of our history isn't taught, but we know that, like I said, our country's evolved. That's clear. It's just how you manage that change, and ideally it should be participative and it should be peaceful, and we should all generally agree that that's what we want to do, whatever that change is. So that's about as deep as I get into politics. But, I totally
understand. For me, it's more of just like, I understand there's a generation of people that don't understand this stuff, and it's also our job to make sure that it's known that it's part of our job as citizens to educate ourselves.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
If you want to make politics better, a healthier place to be a better citizen. Ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
It is, again, it comes down to those raw emotions. Don't give into your anger. You don't stab your neighbor because they have something you want and you feel like you can't get that.
I was going to say, Cameron, you said a while ago, we were talking, you talked about perspective, and that's huge, right? And getting, being able to, as people, to zoom out and get another perspective, zoom out of the equation and go, I know what I feel, but what does this other person feel? And why do they feel that? And then have, a conversation about that and get to the heart of the matter. What is the real issue? Is there really an issue? And that's something that we're not really willing to do a lot of the time, and that's kind of led us to say where we are, I think, today, as a nation. I mean, again, I don't talk politics much, but I think it ultimately comes down to respectful communication, and compromise is really pretty much at the heart of our system of government, is being willing to compromise. And that means not getting always getting what you want, but maybe getting some of it.
I agree. And just to kind of close it, because I don't like dwelling on politics more than needed to, but it is a very broad thing that interjects in a lot of ways. Sure, and I just wanted to kind of specify with my comment on saying it's like a mass invasion. The reason I'm saying it like that is because it may not just be direct actions that cause this. Mm-hmm. It's the indirect, passive things that happens because people need to survive, people need to live, like trade. The common thing, U.S. history, a lot of people know Native Americans struggled with alcohol because people were trading alcohol. And I am not saying by any means that they're the only people that struggle with alcohol. Far from it. But it had an effect on their culture. It had a widespread effect. Not, again, the only factor, but it was an invasion of factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I view it, as an invasion. It was projected as such through circumstance, and unfortunately, one person's trash is another person's treasure. And vice versa. Like disease is kind of that trash treasure kind of thing. Yeah.
I think. I mean, it's a difficult situation. It's a difficult issue, particularly with Native Americans, because they are challenged. Absolutely. challenged economically, challenged culturally, challenged politically, et cetera. I actually am a big fan of Native American art, and that's kind of led me into, trying to understand more about their dynamic, right? And I'm no way an expert, but I have great empathy for their losses, and not just chunks of territory, which are considerable, but loss of loss of identity, loss of population. I mean, just all the challenges. And so I'm encouraged, though, in certain corners where, Native American artists in particular are finding their voice, and there's a long tradition of Native American art. This is, not, this is often, their expressions of their culture or their experience. And it's really fascinating and vibrant and powerful stuff. I'm always encouraged when I see, or come across a new artist or something that's doing something, and celebrating their culture and trying to, share it with others through their art. It's cool.
There's plenty of things to be hopeful for, especially in that regard. I do think we're moving in a healthier direction as a country towards redefining what our relationship with our country's past means with our people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's good. I don't think anybody has I think it's good to recognize the realities of our past, and it doesn't doesn't mean that we certainly shouldn't ignore it. Pardon, say again?
Oh, it just doesn't mean we have to live in them.
Well, I think, recognition. I mean, one of the things that, I correspond with some people in Canada, and what I see all the time is, and I think it's really awesome, is that, in a lot of the government or official things that they do, like if I'm writing to a government agency in Canada, at the bottom is a tagline that just says, hey, I recognize that, we live and work in the ancestral lands of, the Métis or something, and that we acknowledge and respect that. And, it's part of it. It's a little bit of a bumper sticker at the bottom, but it's a really great reminder, like, yeah, okay, I mean, a lot of what America has experienced in terms of its wealth and power and stuff can be attributed to the Native Americans that lived here before us, So, I mean, this place is rich with natural resources and stuff that they stewarded for many, for centuries, for eons, and we are the beneficiaries of that. So we just, like the Canadians do, I think they just recognize that, and I'm not saying it's perfect in Canada, but I'm just saying they recognize overtly that this is the situation, and I think that's a good step. Anyway,
absolutely, I believe it's good to just see, base that we're humanity, above all, we're humanity here, and there, I mean, if you even go back to Native Americans' history. With the origins, there's various things. I mean, I found there's origins of Celtics that ended up making their way to parts of the East Coast, and there's proven like records of various cultures there that I didn't even know about until this last year of study, and
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's greatly interesting, and my point being with it that we really can only move forward, and seeing our differences as parts of a team rather than things that constantly have to be at odds. Like different nations of people. I don't think those different nations have to necessarily have an enemy on the radar all the time. Right. It's circumstance again where things get miscued, and we're unfortunately in a situation in modern times where there's a bunch of past situations that have come up. Yeah, sure. And we live in the world where we pick up on our ancestors' problems. And you're right. All of us have to deal with that. That's not you. That's not me. That's a society where. I'm totally tracking. Yeah. Well, it's super important to have societies be cohesive for that reason.
Yeah, and the way to cohesion is honest communication and being genuine and not manipulative, I can say it, and and again, considering the other person's perspective. I think that's huge. Those are the things that you brought up earlier on, so I appreciate that.
No, I really do appreciate this conversation. I'm having a blast with you, and that was a perfect segue out of the politics. Sure. Honestly, I like to leave it there because sometimes, it just sounds good. Yeah. And it can sound very bad. So
yeah, I hear you.
But we're going to go ahead and move on. I wanted to touch back on your details with the book. Do you feel like you have a certain place you want to see your book go? Or is there like a more of a feeling you want to invoke in an audience as they're reading it?
Well, I will say this because you give me an opportunity, but I didn't write this book for money, right? I mean, I spent a lot of my money doing this. I traveled, I think I counted it up. I traveled probably almost 70,000 air miles and drove probably, I don't know, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 miles to do the homework on this thing. And so at its core, it was a story. It's a story I wrote for my kids, so that they could understand who I was better and understand maybe a little bit about where they come from too. But it has some universality to it. In other words, there are, in my experience, there's things that I do think will resonate with others. But I didn't, like I said, I didn't write it for money. So in fact, if I get any royalties at all out of the ebooks, I'm gonna turn them over and give them back to the museums and genealogical societies and historical societies that kind of help me out. So where do I want to see it go? I would like to see a large readership, I think, because I do think I touch on some very fundamental, human dilemmas, I guess, and I just am sharing my perspective about them, and I think people will be able to read it and it will resonate with them, whether you're estranged from a family or whether you've had a very coherent and solid upbringing. It doesn't. I think it'll still reach out to people. But the journey itself was I think was pretty amazing, and I felt that I was being led, guided, shaped, moved in the direction to find my birth families, and that I think that journey was really special to me. I felt, as I said in the book, that I felt like I had God's hand on my shoulder a lot of the time, and he was just kind of steering me along, and it was stuff I didn't even know about, and that I think is pretty amazing. So the story of discovery is pretty cool, I think, and very emotional. I can read parts of it today and I still tear up a little bit, but where I want it to go, I don't expect to have a bestseller, but I hope that, for people at least who are adoptees, or people who are military brats, or people who, in my case, who dealt with alcoholic parents, or, who had those kinds of challenges as children, and have felt themselves to be well-adjusted and kind of connected as adults, can read this and kind of go back and go, yeah, I experienced that, or there's the name for that thing that I experienced and I didn't know the name of that feeling or that moment. So things, as I said, like disenfranchised grief, or traumas that come as as an adoptee or a brat, moving around. Those things I've really kind of tried to elaborate on and help people understand.
I think that's wonderful. I think that puts it in a good frame of light, at least perspective wise. The details on why you want it to get out there, I think, are really honest and forthright. I think it's great that you're putting funding towards those associated helps. That's great. I'm all for that kind of stuff, and I see exactly where you're coming from, man. Like, you're trying to pass on the favor, essentially. You're trying to open
that's
the
really
gateway for another person.
Yeah, absolutely. It says, we've talked through the course of this conversation about, about being human, and about evolving, and about communication, and about perspective, and all those kinds of things. And that's really, that's kind of at the heart of what I think the story is just, the situation, sort of the plot scenario is a little bit different. It's not Hollywood, obviously, but it's the same elements. It's the same human elements that we all deal with, all the time. And because it's inherently who we are as humans, to deal with grief, to deal with disconnection, to deal with lack of perspective, to deal with trauma in all kinds of different ways. And and when you're a kid, you're certainly not really well equipped to deal with it. And it's not sometimes until we become adults and we learn something about what we experienced, that we're then able to kind of go, okay, because I could tell people I had a happy childhood, but lots of it was difficult and some of it wasn't fun at all. But when you ask me, I'm like, yeah, I had a happy childhood. I remember my birth mother, that was one of the first questions she asked me, are you happy? I'm like, yes, of course. being adopted doesn't mean I was inherently unhappy. Now, my parents were sometimes difficult, and I was difficult because I was a teenager and grown up and full of emotions and hormones and everything else, so I mean, it's typical, but overall, it's just about finding perspective and understanding where you come from and being able to synthesize that into who you are today, and that's kind of part of the theme of the book. Is that.
Now, there's an element of what you just said that I think is fascinating to relay to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs has one of the most famous speeches in the tech industry, of course, where he talks about connecting the dots. And I'm sure you're familiar. It's a pretty well-known business trope. I hate to say it like that, but so many.
Yeah, connecting the dots is pretty common vernacular. Yeah.
Yes, and again, like, he's not the first to make the concept, but he says it in a way that's really well worded for this, where you really have to hope that the dots will connect in the future, and once you get to that future, you kind of realize, like, oh, it wasn't that bad, and you're able to let that go, and you're able to let those bad negative elements go, or at least you hope to get to that point.
Right. And so, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. I think, for me, this book was very cathartic, right? I mean, this was exploring stuff that I, with thought in fleeting moments, little snippets of things, floating around your head, or as you're growing up, like, oh, why am I like this? Or why is that? And you're sitting there, you don't have answers. But to spend the time, in this case, 6 years really, to find the answers and then put them on paper. Well, that process was, like I said, it was really cathartic. I mean, there were times when I'd never really, shared with my kids or my wife or anybody else, close friends, some of the stuff that I experienced, and then I'm putting it on a piece of paper and I'm looking at it in front of myself, and I'm no shame, I'm sitting there just bawling because I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize how impactful those moments were, or that experience was, and then to just sort of get through it and go, and then fold it into the story and make it have meaning and relevance to the whole. That was a way of processing some of this stuff, and going, yeah, okay, it was, moving around was traumatic, and my dad's alcoholism was bad, and being adopted is difficult, in some ways, and not knowing your genetic origins or the reasons why you are who you are, right? So yeah, those are challenges, and then but working through it and kind of writing it all out and all that. I mean, maybe it was just a giant exercise in self-help, but it was great. and again, I think at the end, the creative part of it came through, and I was able to put that into I think a coherent story that has meaning, should have meaning for more than just my immediate family and more than just my close circle of friends, so that's my fingers crossed. I hope that's the case,
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I really want to read your book, actually.
Well, I hope you do.
Yeah, no, I really plan on it. I'm notorious about being bad at reading. You can ask anyone. But it's actually a personal goal this year. I'm really working towards making that different. I don't want to live in a space where I feel like I'm hindering myself on a perspective where it really just comes down to my self-discipline. Really, I need to just take the time, and sometimes we don't want to take the time.
I totally get you. Yeah, I get you, but I think I'm this close to getting it done. I'm just waiting on some approvals from the folks I work for, because they did talk a little bit about my military time, and they want to make sure I didn't say anything I shouldn't have said, which I didn't, but they're going to check, and
sure.
And then we should be good to go. And I'm hoping to have it out on, Kindle or through Ingram Spark, some of these companies that help, authors self-publish. Fingers crossed, before the end of this month, I know how bureaucracies work because I'm part of it. And so, my request for review of a particular chapter about my military time, they said, we'll get it done and it'll be a week or two, and I'm like, yeah, I know what that means. That means like it's gonna be a month or so. So I'm trying to be realistic and patient about it. And then for the second volume, I like I said, I've got some stuff that I need to track down in terms of making sure I'm not, I'm doing fair use of somebody else's material, because there's some really good stuff in there about my great grandfather and his time as a outfitter and guide in British Columbia in the early 1900s, which is amazing, fascinating stuff. So I've sourced a book that my great grandmother wrote, and I just want to make sure we're good there, and some other things too.
Oh, I can't wait. And honestly, if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and post the links when you do get it published on this episode below.
Yeah.
And
we've been talking about it, but I haven't even said what the title is. It's called From This Dust. And, that title for me, alluded to my connection to these ancestors that have gone. So, from dust to dust. And also being from somewhere that's important. And here in Hawaii, the Aina, as I said earlier, is really important to me. Hawaii is full of red dirt, like a lot of places, a lot of iron in our soil from the volcanoes. But being of this dust is also really important to me, being from here and embracing the culture and the lifestyle that is Hawaii, and knowing my immigrant parents moved here to have a better life, and all those things are like huge to me, right? So
I understand that.
I chose the title From This Dust, and I don't know if everybody will get it, but that's what it means. So.
No, it's someone who grew up around nature, and you saw my nature, Plymouth County. It's gorgeous up there, but I'd be the first to tell you, if someone ruined that, I would cry. I would just,
absolutely.
I mean, it's one of those things you just know that it's special. It's irreparable, and your heart literally is in that land, like, and so I can respect your values in that statement.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. It's important.
It's a beautiful thing. We're able to come together from different communities, different walks of life, and different generations. Sure. And still find relatability, and that gives me hope as a youth.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm appreciative of being with you. To be honest with you today, so this has been very cool.
No, it's honestly been my pleasure, and this really segues us well into our closing statements. And I wanted to see if you would have any books, articles, sources of media that you find fascinating you'd like to share with the audience, something that touches your heart.
Well, I this is a hard question. I've read there's some great literature out there, and some of them touch me because they're similar stories of loss and redemption, or finding a connection and stuff like that. I'm reluctant to kind of just give a reading list. What I would say is, I think the classics are the classics for a reason, and they tell the common human story in just many different ways. And so even reading the classics is really classic literature, classic English literature in this particular case, is really illuminating and uplifting. I guess that's where I kind of sort of stop. I think of a title or two, but they may not appeal to everybody. I like stories with some romance in them, and I don't mean romance novels. I mean stories that are about commitment and human connections and love and honoring that even through adversity and those kinds of stories are really pretty cool. But you can find them, like I said, you can find them in the classics. You can, it's. I'm dancing around on this because I just I feel like,
there's no right or wrong answer.
There is no right or wrong answer, but if I was looking at my shelf behind me, I'd probably say, oh, well, this story here is really good. And, but I'm kind of on the spot. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know which one to say.
The brain's a pretty powerful thing when it comes to podcasts and recommending books. There's some people I've had on the show that, and in our panel too, that they can't help but they gotta grab the book and
I was like, this is it. This is the one. Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of fiction, and I like, like everybody else. I mean, I like crime novels and fiction and stuff like that, and I enjoy it, But the ones that move you, kind of in your soul, are the great pieces of literature, and usually those are, Nobel Prize winners or Pulitzer Prize winning kinds of pieces, and so there are a number of them. Out there, and I'm struggling right now to think of the one that I really want to say, but it's escaped me, so I gotta go. Oops, I don't know.
And if you remember it post show, sometimes that stuff comes up. I totally do it all the time.
Oh, we'll hang up or whatever, and I'll go, oh shoot, is this?
Yeah, we'll link it up in our description for the viewers as well, if any interest. And I'd say you generally, I love your answer, by the way. I think it's great to suggest, a theater of books, so to speak. It's effective because we're in a society that's dealing with a lot of disassociation. Sure. Books really help socialize you in another form.
Yeah, I'll tell you, from a film perspective, it's probably the answer's a little easier for me because there are a couple of powerful films out there that I think really resonated with me. And these are fairly old, so for a younger generation, you'd have to, kind of dig them out somewhere. But Out of Africa is a phenomenal story. It's a love story, and it's about two people committing to each other and, over the course of their lives and doing it in kind of an unconventional way, right? I mean, so they're not married, and there's challenges with that, but this is deep, a heartfelt commitment to each other, and it's Meryl Streep and Robert Redford. You can Google it and find it. A good one, and I know there's a new version of it out. I haven't seen it, but The Color Purple really hit home for me. This is a story about, a woman who has to give up her children. They're taken from her, and she spends, kind of a lifetime looking for them. And, the reconnection piece at the end. I mean, I'm just blubbering, usually when I'm watching it. And, but because it's powerful for me, because it's the same sort of emotions that I experienced finding my birth mother and finding, my birth families and stuff. So those are two films that illustrate a little bit about what I think are powerful media, powerful expressions of artistry that talk to our. I mean, it sounds kind of corny, but talk to our human condition, right? And what we all kind of want, connection, and we all want love, and we all want coherence, and and order, and reliability, and compassion with each other, and that's what you get in the ideal family. But I obviously don't always have ideal families, and again, that was part of what I found too.
I have a question for you, and I actually wanted to ask this at the beginning.
Okay.
You made me remember. I wanted to see if you're into Anthony Bourdain's story at all.
I have not. You know, when Anthony Bourdain was on and he was doing his shows, I'm not a big TV guy, so but I would catch a few of them, and I loved them, and I haven't read his the biography or whatever, the recent. Yes, right. So the definitive biography, right? Good on you for having it. That's cool. He's a guy who I kind of in some ways aspire to be, because Anthony Bourdain, and again, I'm not a TV guy, so I don't like really, you know, I don't watch a whole lot of television. But what I liked about Anthony Bourdain was he was willing to go to places that were uncomfortable. And I mean, outside of his comfort zone, right? And he would go to somewhere and he would kind of throw himself into it and go, hey, we're going to eat, you know, like frog guts or something, or we're going to do this, or we're going to, you know, it's going to be really, you know, this kind of exotic, you know, interesting experience culinarily, right? But at the same time, you know, in his shows, he was, you know, exposing other parts of their culture and stuff. And he was doing what I've always wanted to do since I said, you know, when I was 15 and I figured out, oh, this is what I really want to be. I want to be a Renaissance man. I want to be a bon vivant. A bon vivant is a guy who, you know, is like an Epicurean. You know, you kind of, you don't necessarily live poshly or, you know, with opulence and lots of money, but you're just out there for the experience, you know, and you want to try something new all the time, and you want to push the boundaries, and, you know, and you want to connect with people, and you want to master the different attributes of human knowledge. So, you know, the arts and the sciences, and you know, and literature and all of that. And, you know, so, you know, personally, that he resonates with me because I think he was doing that. And that's the kind of thing I want to do. Now, I don't necessarily want to have a show where I go around and eat weird food all over the world, but, you know, in my own little circle, in my own little life, you know, I want to, you know, chase adventures, and I want to, you know, not comfort is great. Comfort is really a good thing, but I want to live sometimes uncomfortably outside of my zone, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, I do things like, okay, I'll go climb Mount Fuji, or I'll go do this outdoor, you know, PCT hike, you know, and where I'm disconnected and outside of my comfort zone, because, you know, you can make a misstep and you can die out there, and that's terrible, but it does happen. And so elements of risk that you kind of incorporate in your life, you know, that keep you alive. You know, those are the kinds of things I like doing. And Anthony Bourdain is a really good example of that, you know, and I know he had a lot of challenges and struggles, and I respect that. But as he lived his life, I thought it was really, really well done, and he gets a bravo from me for sure.
Yeah, I truly wish both him and Robin Williams stuck around a little longer, man. Those two, I kind of was late to the draw. I literally, yeah. I grew up watching Robin Williams. I'm just so bad with actors' names that it didn't really click that was Robin Williams. I just knew, oh, that's the Night of the Museum guy, you know, or you know, Droughtfire.
Yes, exactly.
But excuse me, Doubtfire. Some people are gonna really hate me if I call it Droughtfire. So, yeah. But the thing with Robin Williams is I learned about him like 3 weeks before he passed, unfortunately. And it was just, you know, the timing of it. I've always had weird timing with that kind of stuff, and again, that personal journey, if it's weird to me, it's weird. Like I can't change that, but it happened at a weird point for me where I was already depressed, and seeing that that was you know, I kind of took the time to understand the situation best I could, because this was someone I wanted, you know, I considered someone I would love to be a friend of. And it's like, why would someone like that take their own life? Well, you know, and you understand how it happens, and the real story behind it, right? Because this is an individual who made a choice, and had a path, and unfortunately, sometimes, you know, life makes it really apparent that our time is limited, and some others have different stories and different effects on people because of that.
These guys were, you know, they were challenged, right? I mean, and it's tragic in the sense that they couldn't find a way forward. I mean, and and in the end, we're deprived of their talent and their, awesomeness. I am very, empathetic to people who are struggling, mentally and emotionally and psychologically with, issues. But I'm really hopeful that there are, and I know there are agencies and organizations and phone calls and hotlines and stuff that are out there to help people. And I just, I would hope that, if people were feeling that they would reach out to that and just take another day, to just think it through and, and then maybe make a different choice because everybody's got something to give, and depriving us, prematurely of that is sad and it's tragic, and and it's disruptive, and it hurts the people who stay behind, and they're in pain and they're struggling to understand, and it's hard. So a very serious topic, but
it's heavy, and it's I like what you said there, though. It really is like, and I understand people that know Robin Williams' situation. Like, I understand why, but it doesn't mean that the form had to happen the way it did. And that is societal pressures. It's a lot of things. It's a lot of factors. Exactly. Who am I to speak on it ultimately? Yeah,
I'm not commenting on what drives those particular people to do what they did. But
as viewers, as members of society who have definitely interacted with a side of these individuals, I feel personally that the message they put out is of hope. And it is one where they wanted to leave on that good note. They wanted to impress you. And that's really what they live for. They live to impress upon you a better way to maybe handle and see life. Like, maybe with a little humor, maybe with a little exploration. Like those two were vast explorers. I mean, in their own rights.
Yeah, no, and for that they deserve immense credit, no doubt. I mean, they were both cutting edge in their own way, and they're appreciated as humans and artists and changers, influencers, whatever you want to call it. It's just tragic that their opportunity to contribute was cut short. I'll just leave it.
Yeah. No, I wholly agree. And I honestly, I just wanted to bring it up because, especially with Anthony Bourdain, I saw a similar connection with how you kind of are trying to display what your experience was. It's like you're very much focused on that quality, but you have the quantity too. You found the quantity you didn't expect to find.
Right.
And that's beautiful. That's the journey we're all talking about. I know if we probably talked to Anthony today, he'd say, and I'm pretty sure based off of interviews, like, you didn't expect to ever put out shows that long.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just roll with the punches and you make something beautiful out of it. You get humbled up, and just like life
gives you that opportunity. Life gives you that opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is a great place to segue into your closing statement. If you have anything that you'd like to close out the audience with, feel free.
I just want to say thanks, Cameron. I mean, I thank you to you. I appreciate it very much. Just for the opportunity to talk about, the book a little bit and some of the other things we touched on. Good conversation, right? And I appreciate you personally staying in touch, and because a lot of times in the PCT community you bump into people, and it's we're like atoms bouncing off each other a little bit, and the interactions are almost always good, but you move on, and you don't see anybody again, you know what I mean? And that's fine. It's totally good. That's kind of what life is. But in this particular case, you were generous and gave me the ride, and I super appreciate it. And it was all fortuitous that it fit together, and that we had a mutual friend that helped us out that way, and so that's why I think sometimes that there's a lot of stuff beyond our control, that we're just maybe players on the stage, so to speak, and that the big directors behind us are kind of orchestrating things to move us into different situations, to be able to have relationships or to meet each other and get something good out of it. So in the end of the day, just really thankful for you staying, we continuing our relationship, and how it started. It was really cool, and then offering me the opportunity to just come on your podcast and talk a little bit. I can't thank you enough. It's been awesome.
Man, I the feeling's definitely mutual. One of great respect, and it's really been an honor to have you on. I enjoy your banter and conversing on these subjects, and I can tell you're very intellectual. Like I like to focus around where it's more about that journey with a conversation rather than what you have to tell that other person. I really get the sense that you enjoy this. You enjoy being here in this interaction, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, cool. I have. And if you have me back, I'll enjoy it again.
well, if you want to stick through, you'll be our next and our first official podcast guest on the Intellectual Adventure Podcast.
Okay, that sounds cool. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, I actually look forward to that discussion in the future here. So thank you again, Fritz, and honestly, it's been a pleasure today. I hope everyone enjoys this episode, and we will connect on the next. Thanks again.
Okay. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks again, Fritz, for being on the show. We had a lot of fun with this one. I really think it was an educational discussion. Overall, I look forward to the future of the show through this year. We have some more guests scheduled to be on the show soon, so stay tuned, and we will be featuring as soon as possible what's to come. I wanted to update you on one thing before I leave. Sasquatch Farms has been improving their website and their list of available items on the site. If that's something that interests you, please visit them at sasquatchfarmcbd.com for all your latest CBD needs. Thanks again, and hope you enjoyed today's show on the World Networking Podcast. Until next time.